My mother-in-law's secret almost destroyed my family, but the truth was far more twisted than I ever imagined. My life, on the surface, was the kind of picture-perfect existence people post on social media. I had Sarah, my wife of 10 years, a woman whose laughter still felt like the first warm day of spring. We had 2 beautiful children, Lily, age 7, with my eyes and Sarah's smile, and Tom, 5, a whirlwind of chaotic energy that mirrored my own childhood. We lived in a modest but comfortable suburban home, the kind with a slightly overgrown lawn and a basketball hoop that had seen better days. It was a life built on love, trust, and the quiet hum of routine. The only dissonant note in our symphony was Sarah's mother, Carol. Carol was a woman who seemed to believe affection was a zero-sum game, and Sarah's marriage to me, a mere high school history teacher, was a sign of her daughter's failure to secure a better offer. Her visits were always a tightrope walk of forced pleasantries and backhanded compliments, but we managed. We built a firewall around our little family unit, and for the most part, it held. The cracks in that firewall began to appear on a sweltering Saturday in July. Carol had fallen and sprained her wrist, a minor injury that she treated like a death sentence. Sarah, ever the dutiful daughter, was spending her days at Carol's house, helping her with things she could easily do herself. To give Sarah a break, I volunteered to go over and do some of the heavier chores Carol had been neglecting, like clearing out the clutter in her home office. The room was a mausoleum of old bills, expired coupons, and stacks of magazines. As I pulled a heavy filing cabinet away from the wall to dust behind it, a small nondescript manila envelope fell from the space between the cabinet and the wall. It wasn't sealed. My name, Mark, was written on the front in Carol's sharp cursive script. My first instinct was to leave it alone. Interacting with Carol's private affairs felt like trespassing in a snake pit. But a morbid curiosity, a feeling that this was something I wasn't supposed to see, gnawed at me. I opened the flap. Inside were 2 sheets of paper from a company I recognized, one of those direct-to-consumer genetic testing services. The first page was a consent form, filled out in Carol's handwriting, but with my children's names, Lily and Tom, typed neatly below. The second page was the results report. My heart hammered against my ribs as my eyes scanned the dense scientific text. I found the section I was dreading: paternity probability. For Lily, the number was 99.9%. For Tom, it was the same, 99.9%. They were mine. There was no doubt. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Why had my mother-in-law secretly DNA tested my children? And then I saw it. A small, folded note tucked behind the report. In Carol's handwriting were 3 chilling words: "The plan begins." The relief evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, icy fear. This wasn't about reassurance. This was something else entirely. This was the beginning of a war I hadn't even known we were fighting. The drive home from Carol's house was a blur. The world outside my car window seemed muted, the green trees and bright sun a mockery of the storm brewing inside me. That note, "The plan begins," echoed in my mind, a sinister drumbeat against the rhythm of the engine. The relief of the DNA results had been a fleeting sunbeam, instantly swallowed by a hurricane of questions. Why? What plan? The evidence was clear. My children were biologically mine. So what was Carol trying to achieve? As I pulled into our driveway, the sight of our home, our sanctuary, now felt tainted. I walked through the front door, the familiar scent of Sarah's lavender room spray doing nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. I could hear the kids laughing in the backyard, a sound that usually brought me so much joy, but now it was just a painful reminder of what was at stake. Over the next few days, I became a silent observer in my own life, replaying every interaction with Carol over the last 2 years. It was like watching a horror movie for the second time, seeing all the clues I'd missed the first time around. I remembered a family barbecue about a year ago. Carol had pulled Sarah aside, her voice a low, urgent whisper. I hadn't thought much of it then, just another typical Carol moment. But now, I remembered the look on Sarah's face when she returned, pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She'd said she was just tired, but I saw the lie now. I remembered another time, at Christmas, when Carol had commented on how much Tom took after his mother's side of the family, a seemingly innocent remark that was loaded with a strange, knowing weight. She'd look at me with a pitying expression, one I had dismissed as her usual condescension. The pieces started clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Carol hadn't just been passively disapproving, she had been actively planting seeds of doubt. For 2 years, she had been waging a covert campaign of psychological warfare. The DNA test wasn't the beginning of the plan, it was the culmination of it. She needed proof, one way or another, to execute her final move. The results proved my paternity, but her notes suggested she was going to use them anyway. How? The only logical, yet insane conclusion was that she was going to lie. She was going to tell everyone, including Sarah, that the results proved the opposite. The thought was so monstrous, so utterly evil, that it made me physically sick. I had to tell Sarah. I had to show her the papers. But a paralyzing fear held me back. How would she react? Would she believe me or her own mother? This wasn't just about Carol's lies anymore. It was about the foundation of trust Sarah and I had built over a decade. Showing her those papers felt like holding a lit match to a gas leak. I knew our lives would never be the same, but I couldn't let Carol's poison fester in the dark any longer. I had to confront my wife with a truth that had the power to either save us or destroy everything. I chose a Tuesday evening. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and the world felt still, as if holding its breath. I found Sarah in the living room, curled up on the sofa with a book, a soft lamp casting a warm glow on her face. She looked so peaceful, so blissfully unaware of the darkness I was about to unleash. My heart felt like a lead weight in my chest. I sat down beside her, the manila envelope feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I didn't say anything at first, just placed the envelope on her lap. She looked up, her brow furrowed in confusion, and then she saw her mother's handwriting on the front. A flicker of apprehension crossed her face. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the documents. I watched her face, a canvas of shifting emotions. She saw the consent forms with her children's names, her confusion deepening. Then her eyes landed on the results, the 99.9% probabilities. I expected relief, maybe even anger at her mother's audacity. Instead, her face went pale. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, followed by another, until she was silently sobbing, her body trembling. Her reaction was not what I had anticipated. It was a reaction of profound, soul-crushing despair, not shock or anger. I reached out to her, my hand on her shoulder, but she flinched away. Through her tears, she began to speak, her voice a choked whisper. She knew her mother had taken the samples. Carol had told her it was for a comprehensive family health history, a plausible lie that Sarah, in her desire to please her mother, had accepted. She had even helped, swabbing the kids' cheeks while Carol watched with an unnerving intensity. But Sarah didn't know about the results. Carol had never shown them to her. Instead, for the past 6 months, ever since the test was done, Carol had been feeding her a different story, a story of infidelity and betrayal. Carol would call Sarah late at night, her voice dripping with false sympathy, telling her she had proof that the children weren't mine. She never produced the proof, of course. She just used the idea of it, a phantom threat, to chip away at Sarah's sanity. She'd tell Sarah that I was living a double life, that she was protecting her by not revealing the whole truth yet. The psychological torment had been relentless. Sarah confessed that she had started to believe it. The constant doubt, the insinuations, it had all worn her down. She explained her recent distance, her unexplained sadness. She hadn't been pulling away from me. She'd been drowning in a sea of her mother's manufactured lies, too ashamed and terrified to tell me what she was being told. The DNA results in her hand weren't a vindication. They were just another piece of her mother's cruel game. She didn't know what to believe anymore. My heart broke for her, for the pain she had endured alone. In that moment, we weren't just a husband and wife dealing with a meddling mother-in-law. We were two victims of a calculated emotional assassination, and our marriage was the target. The enemy wasn't each other, it was Carol. And now, for the first time, we were seeing her clearly. The next few days were a blur of whispered conversations and shared tears. The wall between Sarah and me, the one Carol had so meticulously built, crumbled into dust. We were a team again, united by a common enemy and a burning need for answers. The why of it all haunted us. Why would a mother do this to her own daughter? What could possibly motivate such a sustained, malicious campaign? It was more than just disliking me. This was a vendetta. We decided to become detectives, to excavate Carol's life until we found the root of her poison. Our first stop was Sarah's estranged father, David. He and Carol had divorced over a decade ago after a bitter fallout, and he had little contact with Sarah, mostly because Carol had made it difficult. We found him living in a small, tidy apartment a few towns over, a man who seemed quieter, softer than the angry man Carol had described. We laid out the whole story, the DNA test, the lies, the note. David listened, his face a mask of grim recognition. He wasn't surprised. He told us that Carol had always been obsessed with status and money. She had a deep-seated resentment for the life they had, which she considered beneath her. He then revealed a crucial piece of the puzzle. A few years ago, Carol had approached him, asking for a significant loan, claiming she had fallen into debt with some unsavory people. He had refused, and that had been the last time they spoke. This new information sent a chill down my spine. Debt, desperation, it was a powerful motivator. Armed with this, Sarah and I started digging deeper. We knew Carol kept meticulous financial records, not out of organization, but out of a need to control. The next time we were at her house, under the guise of checking on her wrist, Sarah borrowed her mother's key to her filing cabinet. That night, spread across our kitchen table were Carol's financial statements. The truth was stark and ugly. She was drowning in credit card debt and had taken out several high-interest loans. But it was one recurring monthly payment that caught our eye, a substantial wire transfer to an account in the name of a man we didn't recognize. A quick online search of the name connected us to Richard Sterling, a wealthy, widowed businessman, an old family friend. And then we found it, an old email chain, printed and tucked away in a different file. It was between Carol and Richard's sister. The emails were discussing a potential match between Sarah and Richard. Carol was actively trying to broker a marriage between my wife and this rich man, selling Sarah like a prize horse. The timeline was undeniable. These emails started around the same time Carol's debt became unmanageable, and long before the DNA test. The test wasn't the beginning of the plan. It was the final desperate act to make her plan a reality. She needed to destroy my marriage so she could sell Sarah to the highest bidder and bail herself out of financial ruin. The depth of her betrayal was staggering. The evidence was a mountain of damning truths. The DNA report, Carol's handwritten note, her financial records, the emails to Richard Sterling's sister. We had a complete picture of her conspiracy. It was no longer a matter of he said, she said. We had the receipts. The question was, what do we do with this arsenal? A quiet confrontation seemed too good for her. She had tormented Sarah for months, tried to ruin my life, and all for money. She deserved to face the consequences of her actions. We decided on a direct, no-holds-barred confrontation. We invited her over for dinner on a Friday night under the pretense of a family meeting to clear the air. The atmosphere in our home was thick with tension. Carol arrived, her usual imperious self, glancing around our living room with a look of faint disdain. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid, expecting to be appeased. Sarah began, her voice surprisingly steady. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She simply laid out the facts, one by one. She started with the DNA test, showing her mother the results she had never seen. Carol's face remained a mask of indifference, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Then Sarah moved on to the lies, the late-night phone calls, the psychological torment. Carol scoffed, dismissing it as Sarah being overly dramatic. That was my cue. I placed the stack of financial records on the coffee table between us. I pointed to the debt, the loans, the monthly payments to a man named Richard Sterling. For the first time, a crack appeared in Carol's composure. Her eyes darted to the papers, then back to us, a flicker of panic. Finally, Sarah slid the printed emails across the table. "Was this the plan, Mother?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with a cold fury I had never heard before. "Destroy my family so you could sell me off to pay your debts?" The facade shattered. Carol's face contorted with rage, not remorse. She didn't deny it. She erupted. She screamed at Sarah, calling her ungrateful, a fool for choosing a life of mediocrity with me when she could have had everything. She confessed, her words a venomous torrent, that she had done what she had to do to survive, that Sarah's happiness was a small price to pay for her own security. She saw herself as the victim. She looked at us, her eyes burning with a malevolent fire, and delivered her final blow. She told us that if we exposed her, she would go to the entire family, to our friends, to our community, and tell them that I had forged the DNA results, that I was a gaslighting abuser trying to cover up my own infidelity. She would spin a narrative so convincing, so full of her own crocodile tears, that we would be the ones who were ostracized. She had spent 2 years building her lie. She was ready to go to war with it. Carol's threat hung in the air long after she stormed out of our house, slamming the door behind her. It wasn't an empty threat. It was a strategic maneuver. She knew that in a he said, she said scenario, the person who told the most compelling, emotionally charged story first often won. And Carol was a master manipulator, a virtuoso of victimhood. We had the facts on our side, but she had the performance. True to her word, she launched her campaign. The next morning, our phones began to buzz with notifications. A lengthy, tearful message had been posted in the extended family group chat. Carol's version of the story was a masterpiece of fiction. She painted herself as a heartbroken grandmother who had discovered a terrible truth. Her son-in-law was unfaithful, and her grandchildren were not his own. She claimed she had DNA proof, but that Mark, in a fit of rage, had stolen and destroyed the documents, replacing them with forgeries to gaslight and control her poor, devastated daughter. She played the part of the protector, the martyr, who was willing to be the villain to save her daughter from a monster. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My phone blew up with accusatory texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. An aunt called Sarah, sobbing, telling her to pack her bags and come stay with her, far away from me. We were social pariahs. The lie was more convenient, more salacious than the truth. People wanted to believe the drama. We tried to fight back, forwarding the real DNA results, the financial records, but it was useless. We looked desperate, like we were trying too hard. Carol had already poisoned the well. We were cut off. Invitations to family gatherings stopped. Friends we'd had for years became distant, unsure of who to believe. The isolation was crushing. We felt like we were shouting into a hurricane, our voices swallowed by the roar of Carol's deceit. This was the darkest period of our lives. We lost our entire support system, our community. But in the suffocating silence of our isolation, something profound happened. Sarah and I drew closer than ever before. We became a fortified island, our little family of 4 against the world. We would sit up late at night, the house quiet, and just talk. We talked about our fears, our anger, but also about our love, our future. We realized that the family we had lost was a house of cards, built on shallow connections and easily swayed by gossip. The family we were building now, in the wreckage, was forged in fire. It was real. One night, as we were scrolling through the hateful messages in the family group chat, a new resolve hardened within me. We couldn't keep playing defense. We couldn't keep reacting to Carol's lies. We had to go on the offensive. We had to create our own stage, our own audience, and tell our story our way. We had to stop trying to convince people who wanted to believe a lie and start showing them the undeniable, unvarnished truth. The plan was simple, but it required courage. We decided to host our own family meeting. We rented a small community hall, a neutral space, and sent out a single formal email to every member of the extended family. The subject line was "The Truth." The body of the email was brief, inviting them to hear our side of the story with all the evidence in its entirety. We didn't beg them to come, we didn't make excuses. We simply stated the time and place. The day of the meeting, I was a nervous wreck. The hall was filled with rows of empty chairs, and I wondered if anyone would even show up. But slowly, people began to trickle in. Curiosity, if nothing else, had won out. Sarah's father was there, sitting in the front row. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filed in, their faces a mixture of skepticism and morbid curiosity. Carol was not invited. We stood at the front of the room, a projector screen behind us. Sarah started, her voice clear and strong. She didn't tell a story, she presented a case. She began with a timeline, showing when Carol's debt started, when she began her talks with Richard Sterling's family. Then she moved to the DNA test, explaining how Carol had deceived her into getting the samples. We projected the real DNA results onto the giant screen for everyone to see. Then came the financial records, the debt, the wire transfers. We showed them the emails, Carol's own words plotting to sell her daughter into marriage. The room was silent, the air thick with shock. For the final act, we played a secret recording we had made during our confrontation with Carol. We had anticipated her denial and had prepared for it. Hearing her venomous confession, her utter lack of remorse, her admission that she was willing to destroy her own daughter for money was a gut punch to everyone in the room. There was no coming back from that. The truth wasn't just a set of facts anymore. It had a voice, and it was Carol's. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The illusion was shattered. The looks on their faces had changed from skepticism to horror, from judgment to shame. In the weeks that followed, the tide turned completely. Carol was ostracized, cut off by the very family she had tried to manipulate. The apologies came pouring in, but Sarah and I were past the point of caring. We had learned a valuable lesson about the true meaning of family. It wasn't about bloodlines or group chats, it was about trust, respect, and the people who stand by you when your world is burning down. We lost a lot, but we gained something immeasurable, a bond that could not be broken. Our life was quieter now, the drama of the extended family a distant echo. As I watched Sarah in the backyard, pushing Lily on the swing while Tom tried to catch butterflies, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The storm had passed, and we were still standing, our little family stronger and more real than ever before.